forum on community needs analysis and learning needs analysis, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this was a sharing session, so that we're not having a formal webinar. Joanne is going to introduce this session, and then we're going to share our resources. And I'm very pleased to welcome Joanne Lockwood and her manager, Jenny Fink, from Ballarat Libraries. Joanne can tell you a little bit about her role and why she asked for this topic today. But before we do, Joanne, could you please acknowledge, make an acknowledgement to country?
Yes, definitely. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I'm coming from today, the Wadawurrung people, as well as the traditional owners of the lands where you are all coming to us from, and where learning takes place across Australia. I recognise First Peoples as the traditional knowledge holders of the land and show my deep respect for their long history of sharing knowledge and learning. I pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and extend this to all Aboriginal people joining us today. Are you happy for me to jump straight in now, Leonie?
Yes, you can jump straight in. We've only got an hour, so we can, we don't know each other when we ask questions. We can just say our name and where we're from. I think will be the easiest one, but we need to get going straight away.
Yep. Fantastic. So I did want to start by saying that the topic today is community learning needs analysis, or community needs analysis. This is a topic that I requested, not because I'm in any way an expert at it, but because this is something that I would really value hearing others' experiences on. So I'm hoping you will all jump in during the presentation and share your experiences, thoughts, ideas, resources, things like that, rather than me in any way standing up and being the expert on this topic, if that makes sense. A bit of a background about me. My role at Ballarat Libraries is the coordinator of Ballarat Library and Learning. So I look after our biggest branch in our network of 3 libraries, and I also oversee learning programs for Ballarat Libraries as a whole. While we have run learning programs at Ballarat for a very long time, as all libraries have, the focus on learning and what lifelong learning can look like for our community has become more of a focus over the last 12 to 24 months perhaps, and will continue to be a focus into the future. So this is an area that we're doing a lot of work on and trying to plan for the future. Hence my enthusiasm for finding out a little bit about how we do community engagement in regards to what our learning needs are in our communities. The presentation that I've got, it is not, it doesn't really have information. It more poses questions that I'm hoping that we can share our experiences on, and I'm sure, Leonie, you'll have plenty to add along the way, as well as others. So I've tried to structure the presentation around some of the key questions that we might have about community or learning needs analysis. The first one, the big one, is why. What is the purpose of conducting a community learning needs analysis? Some of the things that I have identified in the research that I've done is that we would want to do an analysis to identify the gaps. What are people wanting to learn that they don't have the opportunity to learn about? And what are the barriers that might prevent someone from taking up opportunities that do exist? I'd like at this point to maybe open it up and see what other people consider the key purposes of conducting these, and if they've had any success in identifying either gaps or barriers in their own community engagement processes.
Okay. We have Nikki has got her hand up. So Nikki, go ahead, please.
Hi. So we have established 3 regional university study hubs in Tasmania. So a big part of what we do is focusing on remote learning for the community. The community incorporates industry and business as well. And so we had to go to great lengths to conduct I guess to identify what the barriers were to learning and to accessing learning. So we came across many barriers. Unlike you guys, I think you guys probably have a huger population base than us. And so we had to go out to community as opposed to putting anything out via email, Facebook, newspaper, anything at all. We had to physically go out to every single stakeholder in the community, and including, hosting meetings to find out what people actually, what was stopping them from learning. Why do we have such low education aspiration in the regions and everything, and what could we do to address those barriers to learning, so that we had people constantly participating in different kinds of learning. So whether it was accredited or non-accredited, university or vocational, there were heaps and heaps of barriers. So I noted there are a couple there that are similar to ours, but the list went on and on and on. So we encountered intergenerational mindset against learning, different education curriculum, transportation, inter-town rivalry, digital literacy, just literacy or language literacy and numeracy. So there were just so many barriers that we have tried to address through our regional study hubs, by assisting people to, if they come, like an incentive scheme where they come a couple of times a week and we give them a fuel voucher, for example, where we conduct or where we partner with other organisations to offer digital literacy sessions or financial management sessions or all that kind of thing, So, and then to negate actually people not wanting to come to our town because, it was this town and not their own town, we created an outreach support network. So we actually go to them to create sessions, whether it's one-on-one or in a group as well. I don't know if any of that helps, but it's worked successfully for where we are in our remote locations. So
thanks, Nikki. So the main points I picked up from you on that is actually going out to where the community are to find and setting up with various groups, and the range of barriers that you picked up from your surveying was enormous. So I think that must have been very helpful. We'll go on to Diane, who's also got her hands up, before I pass back to Joanne.
Thanks, Leonie. So I'm here in Wollongong. I'm leading a project to help us to become a learning city. And my predecessor, Lara Pugh, did a significant community engagement back in 2022. Asking some of these questions. So definitely looking at barriers to what stops people from learning. Lara did an extensive community consultation. She did go out and do focus groups with various people groups. So some of that was primary schools, some of it was cultural and linguistically diverse communities. She had other workers as well going out and talking to people, engaging with our First Nations people. And I think she ended up engaging with 620 people in total. over that whole program of engagement, which was huge. When it comes to barriers to learning, I'm just looking up. So in addition to the focus groups, we also did 2 different surveys. One was taken up by 149 community participants. So they typically, you'd think of those people like they've scanned a QR code or they've done a will you please respond to this survey. So there's some sense of owning it themselves and interest in it. And barriers those people had, the top ones they had were time, cost, family commitments. We also surveyed community providers, 38 different community service providers, to ask them on behalf of their clients, what do you consider are the main barriers? And the top responses we got from that group of 38 providers was low confidence was the top one, cost, transport, family commitments, and then the next one was no computer, internet, or access or skills. So definitely there's some of the things that we looked at here in Wollongong.
All right, I'll just follow up now with Jenny Thompson, because Jenny was the manager at Wollongong when Lara was there. So Jenny had her hand up. Jenny, do you want to add to what Diane said or add something else?
Do.
Oh, look, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a few things, and the job I do now is a lot of what we do is seeking ways of engaging with the community in our research. And I think one of the things I'd first say is sometimes some of the things that stop people accessing learning are the same things that will stop them accessing a community engagement opportunity. So working out how to overcome those barriers to learning is also about working out how to overcome barriers that people may face in terms of having a voice and letting you know what it is they need. And I think that some of the themes from Tasmania are really important. Things like incentivising people, not saying, and local government has this tendency to say, here we are, come to us, when in fact you actually need to go to them. So identifying networks, existing relationships, having people who you can work with, who can collaborate with you to gain you access to difficult to access communities, who have that trust, because that's the other thing is, you know, sometimes you're coming in as an outsider to groups of people. I could rave on forever, but the only other thing I'd say is that I use always in needs analysis for, I don't know, for years I have used a very old thing that's called Bradshaw's taxonomy of social need. And it was developed in health by a guy called Jonathan Bradshaw. And it looks at a number of dimensions. So it's not just around asking people what it is they think they need. That'll give you one kind of dimension of need. But it also is around looking at what he calls comparative need, looking at express need, which is, so comparative need is what would other similar communities have happening there that we don't have happening here. Express need is, okay, you say you want a local library, but how many people are actually borrowing books from, you know, online, or how many people are actually doing something to follow up on that need. And then the fourth area is what he calls normative need, which is saying, look, in a community of this type or a community of this kind, what should we be providing? What should government provide, or what should local government provide, or what should a community provider provide? So I find that a really useful way of getting beyond just asking people what they need, because sometimes there are other, you know, trying to look at it that 360 kind of way is really good. And then finally, just in terms of what Di said with Lara's methodology, the thing about recognising that there are your primary people you want to consult, but also there are secondary, often providers of services or school teachers, or, you know, there are often a secondary group of people who can also add something to that that discussion around what are the felt needs. Anyway, that's enough, because otherwise I'll talk all afternoon.
Jenny, thank you for that. And I know we're very grateful for your extensive knowledge in this area. I was wondering, could you put that reference, Bradshaw's taxonomy of community needs, in the chat for us so that we can add that to our resource list? Now, I know Danielle's got her hand up, Mari from Brimbank City Council, and she's just undertook an extensive community engagement process, and I've put a reference. I'll put a reference to her talk last year where she gave about 8 handy hints on community engagement. Over to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Leonie. Just what Diane, you could have been reading off my notes because it was very, very similar. Like the barriers were all similar. Yeah, I have had similar experiences with what everyone has said so far. I just wanted to add in there with when we did our consultations, we did them with different community groups. We did them with our partner organisations and stakeholders, organisation stakeholders, and we also did consultation with internally. I'm at Brimbank Council, so I work with many departments that had also worked with the community. So we consulted with sort of 3 different cohorts, and one of the things that I did with the community was it's always good to come bearing gifts, no matter how small. And one in particular, I went and visited a craft group that still meet at a library I used to work at 10 years ago. They still, I mean, I'm still in the same organisation, but I went along and I brought leftover scraps of wool that I had, and so and that was to break the ice. So I went to visit the group, brought them some wool, and started chatting to them, and then got into a deeper conversation about learning, and then invited them to come along to the consultation, and they all did. So if you can find a way in, whether it's visiting a community group that meet in the library and bringing some biscuits and being interested in what they're doing, that I found that really successful way, because I think if I had just gone in there or invited them or asked the staff to invite them, they probably wouldn't have come. So I think you need to really engage and have a conversation with people on a very basic level and then get them in that way. So.
Thank you very much for that, Danielle. And I noticed Sylvia's got something to add before we hand back to you, Joanne. So can we let Sylvia have her say, because I know she's got some things as well.
It's like opening a can of worms. You'll be sorry, Jo, that you asked.
I was going to say I only needed one question, one slide.
Yes. That we found some interesting things happening in our trying to find out what people need. One of the barriers, interestingly, is the word learning. If you have had negative experiences in education, you might think you can't really, that learning's not for you. So working around that one. And an interesting case was we have identified, for example, the need for financial literacy assistance and workshops, mainly for women and mainly for women in the CALD community, in our new communities. But they often feel very overwhelmed assisting, attending a financial literacy workshop that's sort of advertised that way. So we've been bringing in people to talk about the basics of financial literacy. I mean, very basic things like understanding super, it's not giving financial advice, because of course we have to be careful not to give any financial advice, but just understanding how basic financial tools work, and bringing them to their craft groups and having a casual conversation on the side. So it's through, much like Danielle was saying, it was through sitting down and knitting or sewing that they start talking, and it's not a threatening thing. And then they think, oh, this speaker was really, really useful. And so we've started bringing speakers to be sort of joining craft classes and talking on the side rather than at people or, yes. So that's worked really well. Anyway, that's just a small example, but yes, the word learning itself seems to be a barrier at times.
That's going to come up on another slide, so you've preempted me there, Sylvia. I think I'll just move on to the next one, and I'm taking extensive notes here, but some of what I've put on later slides has already been brought up, so I think we're all sort of on the same page here. The next question I had was about what methods have been used most effectively in order to gather that community engagement information. I think from Leonie sent me a sample community survey, and it sounds like other organisations have used surveys and focus groups quite a bit. Someone in one of the other meetings mentioned that they were using games or something quite fun and informal to gather information. Sylvia, was that you?
Yes, we just had a little, not competition, but just a big thing that said, what's on your learning bucket list? And we had lots of examples. And you know, the little signs that you used to have when you had a room for rent with little things at the bottom cut up?
Yeah.
So we made examples like that. That was a totally low-key analog survey, and people could rip things up and put them in the basket as something they wanted. So a quick way of finding out what felt appealing.
Yeah, that's the one I think I remember. That's a great idea. Does anyone else have advice on the best methods that they've used, and in particular, if anyone's used consultants, how you've done that to best effect and to get the best bang for your buck, so to speak?
We've got Jenny's got her hand up, so she's no doubt got some answers to your questions there. And I know Danielle used consultants too. So after Jenny, I might get you to talk about how because your consultant was very good. Okay, Jenny, over to you.
Thank you. Oh, look, I probably, shouldn't, given I am now a consultant, I probably shouldn't be putting in a plug, but I think it can be really helpful when you're time poor, when you don't have a lot of people on your team. So quite often it seems we're doing consultancy work for smaller organisations who don't have a dedicated person to do that kind of research, to do particularly things like doing a review of the literature, which is something that we bring as a academic kind of background consultancy firm. So yeah, I think that's useful. What I was going to add is I think some of those methods you're talking about, Sylvia, which are kind of almost a passive thing. We do what we call word clouding, where you put up a sign with a question in a library or somewhere where you're in a youth centre, somewhere where you know people are going, and sticky notepads and pens, and people can just add their ideas. We might have a whiteboard, and sometimes people put up a bit of graffiti or a bit of profanity, but it's a really good way of people not feeling pressured to have to say something, but being able to voluntarily say something. The other thing that we find really good is imagery. So getting people to take a photo of their local community or a photo of something they like, or draw a picture of something they like, or so something that's again a bit fun but doesn't rely on having great verbal skills. And then I guess the other thing I find, and I have this years and years ago, I saw a survey in hospitality, or went to a presentation, and the presenter was saying, in hospitality you really only have two questions, which was, did you enjoy it and would you come back? And one of the things we often do with surveys, I think, is and we do this too, I believe, is we overcomplicate it and make it too long. People don't complete if they're time poor, or that, so they either don't complete or they don't even start. So that would be just some other thoughts I've had about methods.
Yeah, that's great advice.
All right, we've got Danielle, just a comment from you about hiring your consultants, and then we'll go to Kay.
Yeah, okay, I'll be brief because I did actually write a lot about this, and I can give you...
We can give the reference because we...
Yep, okay, great. Yep. If you can afford one, I would highly recommend it. They are the experts at extracting information for people, and we used a consultant who had done some previous work in a similar area, and you know, they just tailored their sessions, because we had a session for young people. We had a session for a called group where we got an interpreter in as well. And then we had a session for internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. And they really tailored each session to each cohort. So they changed it up, you know, they did interesting games and exercises with the young people. So if you can go that way, I would highly recommend it. And yeah, Leonie will share some information, you know, on that. And you have to be really, really clear what it is that you want to achieve and what you want to get out of each session. And I also did a like a consultant brief that we can share with you as well. So thanks.
That would be
Leonie.
amazing.
Okay, so that's a resource. Kay.
I don't have anything very sophisticated, I'm afraid, but when we did our cultural plan, I found that I often prefer not to use consultants just because I want to be there at the coalface hearing what people are actually saying. But I did use our local arts organisation who facilitated the sessions, and they did things like putting things all around the wall and then prioritising them with sticky dots. So you'd get 3 dots, but there'd be 15 things on the wall to get some sort of idea of where the greatest demand was. The other thing that was really helpful for me was the youth council. Our council has a youth council, and we actually went to them, not just for their advice, but to enlist them to go out and find out things for us, and to also come to our consultations and engage young people. So I guess that's, you know, just a couple of little things that worked for us.
And Sharon, you've got a couple of suggestions as well.
Yes, thanks, Leonie. Look, very similar, and agree with Danielle. Wyndham also used a consultant, and both Diane and I were present in each of those meetings and focus groups and forums with the consultant. So I think perhaps Springbank were the same. So we were always there at every step of the way with the consultant. But what I wanted to add, and agree with all these methods, I think we have to use them all. There's not one single method that can stand alone. It's a combination of as many as what your resource will allow. But in terms of the surveys, which, you know, I think are very, very useful and a need, we've also, as Wyndham's, added a quick poll with on our engagement, or the loop, what we call our engagement tool, and I do that in other ways as well now too. So it literally is the one question. It's used with emojis or icons that are very visual, and it's as simple as, you know, a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a smile. So it's for those that perhaps have a lower level of literacy, but also those that potentially don't want to go down the path of a survey, but will have a sort of engaged enough to have a response. And that poll generated for us another, I don't know, 15 or 20 responses. It takes 30 seconds to do, but it also gives a really quick level of engagement that can capture those that perhaps are really intimidated by the idea of a survey.
That's a good idea, Sharon. My next question, some of this has already been covered, but who it is that you consulted with. I've from other research, I've got general community, hard to reach community. I'd love to know how people are really getting to those hard to reach communities. How have you found engaging learning providers, both informal and formal learning providers in your community? Are they open to getting involved in this type of consultation? Same with businesses. Have you had success engaging with businesses? And then I noted from what has already been said today, people mentioned internal and external stakeholders. I think I'm obviously part of local government in Ballarat, so that's an important one that I probably should have had on the list, is going to the other business units internally. But what has been people's experiences with trying to consult with various groups in your community? What are the successes? What are the challenges?
Well, Nikki was talking about industry. Nikki, would you be able to talk about how you engage industry?
I guess it goes back to the remoteness of our communities, but we everything for us is pretty much done face to face. So any kind of stakeholder engagement is where you will go out and you will talk to industry, you know. So part of my job is to create initiatives that instigate learning of some kind. So whether that is a program to address regional workforce development, or whether it's a school engagement program for lifelong learning, the whole thing is to go in there and say, well, you know, have you thought about this, or would you like to participate in this or collaborate with us on a program that is going to have an education outcome? So for example, I've gone to the mines and I have asked them to participate in our schools, our boys' wellbeing and our women's empowerment programs, which are non-accredited, but they're still learning. I also do a skills builder project where we do units of competency. So we engage an RTO, but we also engage community, so the community of, say, the mining industry, to participate in the learning for a particular project. So we manage to, you know, we will put things out and different ideas of things, and we will approach the groups. So we physically go out into the community according to what we're trying to achieve, or what we can see from an outsider's point of view may be needed. And then we go and do, you know, like the consultation with it. So childcare is a big one. So we've just done a big childcare initiative here on the West Coast that's going Tassie wide. And so the first thing was collaborating with childcare educators, or, you know, childcare facilities, then engaging RTOs, and then working in with the government department to do, you know, this or this or this, you know. So it's multi-layered, but it's all about the face-to-face going and talking to them, and, you know, and being introduced maybe to different parts of the community you might not necessarily get into, like the veteran space, for example. So we do veteran programs, is getting in with the veterans, you know, like, yeah, so it's not necessarily about working with organisations so much. It could just be with the community to create something, but it's getting out there face to face to do it.
Yeah, and that was one of Jenny's things about hard to reach community. You have to actually go out there, like the veterans, and see who's in charge of that particular community, or a faith community, or something else in your community. So I think that that's part of the hard to reach, is who are the leaders of those hard to reach communities. Jenny, I saw your hand up. You were going to add something to that question.
Unmute. So much of it's about relationships and trust with hard to reach communities, and how you find access to those communities in a way that's trustworthy. And then sometimes I think for us, again, as consultants, thinking about, and for people in local government, it's about sometimes an ongoing relationship too. There's nothing worse for communities than to feel someone's come out, asked them a whole lot of stuff, and then disappeared, never to be seen again, you know, and people feel like, and for some communities, so for First Nations communities in some instances, they've been done over literally over and over again, and they're not trusting of that process. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, is how do you honour that relationship. The other comment I was going to make was just about schools, that you need sometimes a longer lead-in time. I'm finding with some of the work we're doing at the moment, we need to get a formal approval from school education in order to be able to access schools, talk to kids in schools, and so that just takes a little bit longer time in an application process. So I hadn't encountered that before in my work with council. I don't know whether Wollongong Council just didn't do it and local schools just let us in, but I'm finding that that's something to have to think about now and take into consideration.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jenny. I remember too that I used to work with surveying school children, and that's the question of ethics, because they're under 18 and you've got to have the parents' consent. So that's a very important consideration, and that's why a consultant or partnering even with a university is a good idea sometimes. Nikki, what's the, you've got your hand up again, so you wanted to add something.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to hog the conversation.
No,
there were
not
just
at all.
two. There were just two things. One is, yes, a long lead time. I guess I'm blessed in that I'm not government, I'm private. So for me, what I do is I go into the schools and I consult with them, say September, October, and we have a plan of what we're going to do through the next year. So, you know, we plan with the teachers and the principals, and we've got that luxury, I guess, again, you know, being more remote. But the other thing is I don't go in telling anybody what they need. I will go in and say, you know, do you have suggestions? Here are my thoughts. What do you reckon? Does it marry in with what, you know, we need in our community at the moment? You know, so particularly with the schools, you know, we do a lot of things around what I say etiquette loosely, but yeah, well-being and women's empowerment. But we also do things like we involve them in nationwide competitions, but they're things that are initiatives from the study hub, and we say, you know, what do you think to the teachers and the principal, and they go, love it, or no, it's not relevant, you know. So, but we plan that, you know, like say around now, we all get together and then we schedule very specific days throughout the year so that then the teachers have a big lead time as well to introduce the topics or you know, whatever it is that we're going to be doing. So.
Thanks. Yes, and it does take time to build up relationships with schools, and I think that that's where it's important that you're part of the networks, because there are networks around in various areas. And I think, Sharon, hopefully you'll talk about some of your networks and how you build up trust for your engagement.
Thanks, Leonie. Brilliant tie-in. It's around a network. So Wyndham a partner with the Wyndham Schools Principals Network, and each year we have what we call a Wyndham Principals Network breakfast that we tap into the network meeting, their regular scheduled meeting, and we hijack about an hour or so, and we have a breakfast. And each year we have a different theme depending on what the principals are interested in. So this year was, for example, the First Nations theme, but last year we, because we were doing our consultations for our new strategy, so we used that time, and it was with the consultant, and so we actually met with all the principals. I think there was 120, and then I guess that was a way into the schools. So it was that top-down approach of engaging with the principals, getting their higher level feedback, and then they could then filter that in through to, I guess, their teachers and then their school community for any further engagement. It's a brilliant network and really highly valued.
Sharon, just one follow-up. The other network is that you're trying to establish trust with is the First Nations Aboriginal networks. And that does, as Jenny said, that does take a long time to build that trust, and it's very easily broken. So how are you managing that?
Yeah, I was very interested when Jenny mentioned that too, because it straight away resonated with us, with Wyndham. So in terms of First Nations, we've really engaged, and exactly the same thing. That community's been consulted over the years on whole different topics. And then what we'd heard when we were doing the original kind of feedback from our previous strategy, that the First Nations people didn't see themselves in our strategy. They weren't reflected. So there were, I guess, some real trepidation in terms of then us starting consultations again. So we did worked really hard to build up that trust, met many times with different areas of the First Nations community, from stakeholders, people, residents, but also to, we're fortunate in Wyndham, we have an Aboriginal community centre, Wanggal Durrung, and it was a brilliant meeting place to be able to do really valued engagement and just slowly build up that trust. And we've heard that. And then when the new strategy came out, the First Nations community could really see themselves in that strategy. We've had incredible feedback from that. So it's really important to engage, work really hard to say, we recognise that you have been consulted, you weren't necessarily, or you couldn't see yourself reflected in previous strategies, learning strategies or learning consultations. And we worked very hard in getting that through in our current strategy. And I think it's establishing that trust, because now that we heard, and it definitely was reflected back with what we heard, and the community are appreciative of that. And that's not to say now that that's done and dusted. We're still working very hard to continually engage with all areas of all communities, but particularly the First Nations community. It's our number one pillar.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, over to you. Back to you, Joanne.
Okay. The next one I wanted to hear experience about is the results. If you have done community engagement in the learning area, which it sounds like many of you have, what did you do with the information? What impact did it have on your work? It sounds like community consultation really assisted with some strategic planning documents, frameworks, that kind of thing. Did you find that you had the right information when you got to those, to building those strategies? Was there areas that you wished you had have asked about and hadn't thought of? Were you surprised with the results, and therefore the impact on your work was different to what you thought it might be?
Well, who's going to go ahead with that, answering that? Donna. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, everyone. I think what's interesting part of this question is really like how did it impact your work? And I think one of the biggest take homes for me is that we just can't get everybody, and sometimes our most vulnerable we actually can't get. So, you know, we part of my team, we work with the early years and really looking at vulnerable families and community members. And going back a couple of slides, we're thinking about the informal and formal learning, and it's actually the catchment of people that actually aren't doing either. You know, it's going into the play groups, you know, more than informal. There's structured play groups, there's unstructured. There's people going to library programs, and some people are actually going to every library program, every play group, and this works for that, and this works for this doesn't work for that. So they're actually engaged. So I guess one of the biggest learning, how did it impact your work, is actually finding how do we reach the people who we can't reach. You know, it's lots of people are engaging in with different community groups or different agencies, but there is a group of people who are not engaging at all with formal, informal. I don't have the answer, but it's like a wicked problem, yeah. Like, how do we actually engage the non-engagers? You know, we've done things. You know, we have outreach. We'll park the side of a street next to a community organisation, literally catch little people and their families as they're walking and hand out yogurt and books and stuff. But it's really a group of people that you just, how do you get? So that was really my comment.
Okay, Danielle. Or Benita.
Yep, I can.
Yeah, you can go first, and then I'll have.
Cool. Danielle's struggling. In response to Donna's question around who can we get, how can we get the people that aren't already engaged with some kind of service? Here at Port Adelaide Enfield, we had some grant funding to run some play streets in conjunction with children's centres and other service providers, and they went through various data sets and found particular streets in particular suburbs where they knew children were living there, but they weren't engaged with the childcare centre. So then we had an event in that street. We closed the road. We provided activities to do. We encouraged people just to come out. And we are literally in your street outside your front door. Here's some toys and some chalk and a barbecue. Come on out. And even, you know, it's really, really targeted local level. And you're talking like 10, 15 families, but that was the way to reach people that weren't engaged in any other service. So that's one idea. I also spoke to my colleague around our digital literacy programs and the data analysis he did. And he wasn't able to come to the session today, but he did give me some information to share. That going through the data we could get from the Digital Inclusion Index as to what skills and abilities our community or our council area were lacking in, and then using the Australian Digital Capability Framework to help us measure outcomes. So he really drilled down with the digital literacy programs into areas of ability that the data showed our community needed. And then we're asking questions, for example, you know, do you now understand how to keep your username and password secret and safe? And just really target the evaluation to make sure we've met that learning need in the particular program. So that was one way the data has informed our work. It shaped the digital literacy program from a beginner program up to kind of next level, but really targeted into what kind of digital literacy needs the community had, or what their gaps were.
Benita, thanks for bringing that up, because I think that environmental scan is one of the most important things to do even before you start doing community needs analysis. It's one, you know, what are your skill levels that you can find from any resource like the index, as you said, about digital literacy and other, you know, data. Jenny talked about a literature review, but also I would like to bring up the environmental scan with your data, and this targets early years. So we'd really like you to share that resource would be great. And we'll go to Danielle now. Are you ready?
Yeah, sorry, my I couldn't take myself off mute, so
Oh, okay,
it happened eventually.
Problem from time
Yeah.
to time.
So just in answer to the, you know, what did we do with the information that we gathered, and the impact, we actually set out our priorities for our different life stages in the strategy differently than we had previously. And we actually embedded what the community said under each life stage. So we didn't just sort of gather this information and then not do anything with it. I mean, so we didn't put direct quotes in, but we, you know, every section has a section that says our community said, you know, we want this, you know, whatever, what's important to them and so forth. So, and then that did actually have a direct impact on our objectives and our priorities. So we related it directly to what the feedback was. You talked about, you know, what was the biggest surprise? For us, a lot of the feedback we got from people, you know, well, particularly in one consultation, they were like, oh, you should do this, we want to see this, we want to see that, we do more of this. And we actually had done all of that. So we had done all of it. So that what we learned from that is we are obviously not communicating or delivering information to the community in the way that they need it or in the way that they can access it. So we need to sort of really change that and work differently. That can be a challenge when you're working in a bureaucratic, you know, department, but that's something that we need to take a long, hard look at, because all of the suggestions that people, I think almost all of them bar one, were things that were happening around council and happening in the community. So yeah.
We have had similar experiences here when we ask what people would like to see, and they invariably say things that we have already done or do as a matter of course, which clearly they don't know about. So yeah, I think that's...
It's on us to,
yeah,
you know, bring that to them. yeah, like I said, in you know, try different ways to let people know what's going on. Yeah.
Thanks for those gems. I remember having a conversation about plain English last year with you, Danielle, when you were doing your talk. So
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
clearly a need.
Yeah. Well, it's a community learning strategy. So if the community can't understand it, then there's no point in having it. So yeah, I've really changed the language to previous ones. Yeah.
Thanks, Nikki.
I really agree with what Danielle is saying about how we communicate to community. You know, I feel like we're using so many different kinds of medium, and you do really need to really make very plain and simple statements about what you're trying to achieve. But the other thing that I find is the shyness of wanting to participate or not wanting to participate, or it could be fickleness. I'm not sure. We're about to hold next weekend a health fest, right? It's a collaboration between council, us, and a university, and it's massive, and it's for the whole West Coast. It's a healthy aging expo, so it's healthy aging and living. Yeah, and we've got all of these providers coming from everywhere who actively try to engage with their clients on the West Coast. And from community consultation and feedback, they have said, "Oh, it's not fair. You know, there are no providers that come down and do health or allied health services on the West Coast." So we're bringing them. I don't think people will come. I still don't think people will come, no matter it'll be whether it's a radio, newspaper, word of mouth. I've physically gone and posted about 200 posters at eye level in the shops, in the post offices and everything, and I still don't think they will come. And, you know, we have tried so many times within the neighbourhood centres, for example, to put things like, you know, euthanasia workshops, diabetes or dementia workshops for people to come and be informed, and they're not being attended. And yet you have the community saying, "Oh, it's not fair, you know, we never get informed about dementia," or just for example, or asthma, or the Stroke Foundation or something. We've got all these people coming, and I still don't think that that the community will attend, no matter how much we publicise it. So I don't know why. Something's going wrong in our marketing, or, you know, we're trying to make things as simple and easy as possible. It's all free. We're trying to entice them with free salmon now, you know, the barbecue and everything.
Free salmon.
I know, right? I've got 10 kilos of salmon donated by our two local aquaculture, you know, companies, and still they won't come. So I don't know what we're doing wrong.
Maybe when it affects one of their family members, they might.
That's what you think, wouldn't you? I mean, you know, that we know that there are elevated rates of things like certain cancers down here. Dementia is huge down here. People having heart attacks and stroke and things like that. And so we've got people coming down to educate the community on, you know, what they can do, how they can look for signs, who they can contact and all of that. Melanoma people coming to skin cancer checks, and I still don't believe that they'll come.
Maybe you could partner with one of the farmers or something who's actually suffered one of those diseases.
We've done that, yeah. Yeah, we've done that as well. We've got someone coming. But it still doesn't seem to make a difference, and I just don't know why.
Keep going,
there's such a lack of interest.
It will get through it. Even if you get one person, and you know, their family members, I think those messages are really important. Okay, so Jenny, I know we've got Sharon first, and then Jenny Thompson.
Yep, thanks, Leonie. Yeah, I can hear Nikki. That would be so frustrating. I just think it sounds like you're doing everything right, and I think you just have to keep on doing it, and eventually it will resonate with the community. It's, yeah, you literally can put it on, but you actually can't, you know, force people to attend. But keep plugging away there. I just to answer the questions, the results and impact from our engagement around our strategy, the information we did with what we gathered went directly fed straight into our learning community strategy, and an outcome was the action plan. So a very detailed action plan that will essentially form the actions for the entire year and going forward. In terms of our community engagement feedback report, we listed what the community said. So you said, and then we did. So for every single response was, you said this is what we did. And that was a report, engagement report back to our community that we're required to do. So it was very transparent, and literally, you know, for every single feedback we had, was there a response in a feedback.
That sounds
we have about 4
fantastic.
minutes left, I think. So I want 1 minute from Jenny Thompson, and then I know
Yep.
Jenny Fink is wanting to say something. So Jenny Thompson, over to you.
All right, I promise to try and be 1 minute. I guess there's three comments I want to make. One which is around, I think sometimes with health stuff, health promotion stuff, there's an element of denial from people, that they have that anxiety that if I go along somehow I might get it, or I think I've got it, or I'll find out I've got, you know, so there's that, I think, is a real element. Secondly, I think somebody made a comment before around the impact, and I think that something about when you have a consultant, you want to be there, and I think you really have to be there, because I think the impact of hearing from your community goes on and on and on and on. You know, you think about what people have said. It's not just about getting the report or getting the strategy done. It really can resonate with you for, I think, a long time after you've heard it and you finish the process. So I just think that's so important for your ongoing practice, or our ongoing practice. And then the last thing I want to say is just thinking then about how you get that impact. It's not just about writing the strategy or putting a report together. How do you impact that on your executive, on the leaders in your organisation, so that somehow you're influencing or you're sharing what the community have said to you, not firsthand, but it can be firsthand, and thinking about, you know, strategies where you actually get them to hear firsthand or participate in your engagement, but how you can relay that on, because it does have an impact beyond just the words and beyond just creating the strategy. There you go.
Oh, thank you very much. And I take your point about, you know, it's not just a strategy, but it's actually impacting the leaders as well and getting that message to leaders. And I know Jenny Fink is a leader, so we can hear from Jenny now.
Well, I was actually just going to listening to what Nikki was saying, and scared about people not coming to an event. So one of the other teams that I lead is an amazing team called Aging Well, and what we run a number of community expos for the over 55 age group. So people age 55 wouldn't say they're in the Aging Well category, but we run these amazing community expos throughout the year, and this team is brilliant at it. What they do is intersperse heavy topics with so if there was an expo on, there'd be there might be community members providing information. It could be all sorts of community members, it could be health organisations, but interspersed with that will always be food, so lots of food, and also entertainment. So I'm not sure whether you've thought about bringing in someone to sing. There's always dancing involved, someone singing, lots of people showing how to do Tai Chi or Qigong, things like that. And without fail, we get dozens and dozens. And in fact, the expo for Seniors Month had hundreds and hundreds of people attending. So it's I guess balancing those topics, if you can, with lots of fun and lots of silly things as well, but also lots of food. We had CWA catering at this one, so it was just fantastic. But yeah, it's just a suggestion.
That's amazing, Jenny. Yes, I think food is very important, and entertainment, and especially if they know someone. I mean, the Learning Festival at Wyndham, they had who did you have at the beginning? Dr. Carl, and you know, he can put scientific items in a very plain language and get the message across to people. but people turned up because it was him and he's on television and things like that. And then, you know, the feedback, I was reading the feedback, and it was amazing that they really enjoyed that and learning about science. Anyway, we've come to the end, and I can't believe it. What a rich discussion. Joanne, do you want to just finish? And I didn't hear from Faith from Canning either, and I know you've just been through a community engagement present, or from Hannah. So thank you for attending, and I hope you got something out of it. Joanne, would you like to finish, please?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Leonie. I feel like I've really had the easy job today, posing the questions and then handing over to all of you. I'd like to say a huge grateful thank you from me for all of you for sharing your experiences. I'm really looking forward to going through the process somewhere down the track for Ballarat, and to see what the outcomes are for us, and how that can impact some form of lifelong learning framework, which we're hoping to develop over the next little while. So it was amazing to hear everyone's thoughts. Thank you so much for being so willing to jump in and share those experiences.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Joanne, for putting those questions together, and thank you for everyone. Now, just to let you know, our last informal learning seminar will be on the 8th of December, and I'm not going to have a topic. It's just you can help us plan next year, the topics for next year. But we do have Benita's webinar, Benita and Sylvia, the climate resilience webinar and community education. So please register for that on the 24th of October, 3:45 Melbourne time. A flyer has been sent out, so please check your emails. If you haven't received one, let me know and I will get one to you. Benita and Sylvia and I are going to do a little bit of planning between now and then, and Sharon, to make sure it's going to be a fantastic event. So again, I really thank you again for sharing and for contributing to this, what's been a very rich discussion. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Leonie. Thanks
Thanks,
everybody
everyone.
for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.